Thank you for coming to the Choosing Your Schools. We're going to talk about how do you figure out where to apply to if you're applying to medical, dental, podiatry, optometry, and veterinary schools. I don't know if I have had the following conversation with any of you, but it's very easy to get in this sort of mindset when you're thinking about applying of I want to go wherever I can get in. But it's really much more important that you think about where do you want to go. It's true that in some ways you don't have control over this process, but you do want to take the amount of control that you do have and think about, okay, where do you want to go? It tends to be, and what I tend to see is that when you apply to the schools that are the best fit for you, that's when people have the most success. So applying to medical, dental, optometry, podiatry, veterinary schools, it's different than undergraduate schools, right? In undergraduate programs, you're going to get in somewhere. It's a question of, where are you going to go within the rankings? It's a question of finding a school that's the right match with your GPA and your SAT score, and maybe with some other experiences. It's a question of figuring out, do you want a liberal arts school? Do you want a big school? Do you want a research-based school? To some degree, that is the case with medical, dental, etc. programs, but it's more really about finding school fit. So you really want to be thinking about, is there a good fit between you and the program, right? You want a program to look at your application and think, oh, this applicant will be so perfect for our entering class. So you really want to think about who you are, and that's part of why we have you doing this huge self-assessment right now. Who are the schools and how do your experiences match up with those schools? Because that's when you're going to have the best fit. When the schools look at you and you look at the schools and you're like, oh, this would be so perfect. We would be absolutely the perfect fit. You get me, right? So what we recommend, and I know this is hard, but you really want to start by taking GPA, entrance exam, and geography out of the picture and think about what you want from your doctoral experience. So what is central to your career goals? And I put down here at the bottom, thinking in the long-term perspective, right? 18 months from now, hopefully you'll be starting in your medical program. Where do you want to be, right? Where do you want to be going? Ideally, what's your goal? What do you hope? Obviously, the admissions committees are going to have a say in it, but if you took them out of the picture, where would you want to be? Yes, obviously you have to do a realistic assessment. Where are your grades? Where's your entrance exam? But at the same time, put yourself in that picture and your goals in. 3 years from now, when you're finishing up your clinical class or your didactic component and starting in the clinical piece of your education, where do you want to be? Where do you want to be doing your clinical work? Where do you want to be getting your hands-on experience? 5 years from now, when you're matching into residencies, what kinds of things do you want to be thinking about? If you're going to dental school and you're thinking maybe you'll be starting to work, what do you want to be thinking about? Same with veterinary school, optometry programs. 8 years from now, for those of you who are going to medical school, that's potentially when you'll be finishing a residency, and what kinds of things are going to be important to you. 20 years from now, you'll be mid-career and kind of thinking about, okay, what is going to be important to you? What life goals do you have beyond your career, and how are those going to mesh in with your career? And then 50 years from now, one day, believe it or not, you're going to be 70, and looking back on your life, what do you want to be thinking about? Now, that obviously is a lot of pressure, and where you choose to apply is going to have an impact on all those things. But, this is not like, oh, if you apply to one school, it's going to be completely different tracks. I mean, of course, it's a fork in the road, but don't put so much pressure on yourself with this decision that, oh my goodness, think of it more as an opportunity to think about what do I want, not as a way to stress yourself out more, I guess is what I'm trying to say. It's going to be different for each applicant. What you're thinking about and concerned about is different for each applicant. So this is a list of some of the things that may be of importance to you as you're planning and kind of thinking about what factors do you want to consider. Obviously, we never take the GPA and the entrance exam score out of the picture. Geography, you know where you are physically located, is important. But you also definitely want to be considering mission. You want to be considering the school curriculum, culture, the cost of education, where you will be doing your clinical rotation, if there's special programs, electives, residency placements, if you're really engaged with research, what kind of opportunities would you have? When will you have patient contact opportunities? So all of these factors will play into your decision. And I just want to make a little note on GPA and entrance exam scores. This is data from Boston University Medical School, which is a wonderful program, one of the most applied to programs. This is data from a couple years ago. You can see they had almost 11,000 applicants for a class of 180. Now, when you look at the GPA for accepted applicants, you can see that the top 10%, so the top 18, well, this is, I guess this is a little tricky because the numbers down there are matriculated and then the numbers up top are accepted. But the top 10% are 3.97 or higher in terms of GPA. The next 40% were between 3.81 and 3.97. So still really high GPAs for that next group. The next group, though, when you look at them, the group that's between 10% and 50%, their GPAs are in this sort of 3.5 to 3.8 range. So they had 72% or 72 students who matriculated who had a GPA between 3.5 and 3.8. Now, if you look, they had, again, 11,000 applicants. You can be sure that within that pool of applicants, they had more than sufficient that if they wanted to have 100% of their incoming class have a GPA in 3.8 or higher, they could have done that. GPA is not the only thing of importance to Boston University, right? They're looking for a lot more than that. They are looking for that school fit. They're looking for people who have a diversity of activities and experiences and in some way will contribute to their class. So if you're somebody who has a GPA that is not in that 3.8, 3.7 or higher, in particular, you need to be considering, okay, how might I fit with the school? But really all applicants do, because just because you're in that higher GPA range, they're not going to automatically accept you for your GPA. Yes, it's a nice place to be, having a stronger GPA, but you still want to make sure that you can articulate, why do I want to go to this school? Now, in terms of geography, you strongly want to consider your own state school if your state has a state school. Some states are really lucky, they have many state schools. Massachusetts has one, New York has four, and that's awesome. There are some states that unfortunately, like New Hampshire or Rhode Island, don't have a state school. If you do have a state school, if you're lucky enough to really strongly consider those schools, if you're from New York, unless there's a particular reason where you're like, there's absolutely no way I would go to Buffalo, really strongly consider applying to all four. The states are going to give strong preference to in-state applicants. And, you know, if you're looking at a school and you think Buffalo, wow, it's really cold there, ask yourself the question, if I had the option of going to Buffalo or not going to medical school, would I go to Buffalo? If the answer is nope, I wouldn't go to Buffalo, then don't apply there. If the answer is yes, I would go to Buffalo, then apply there. So you're going to apply to your own state school. Otherwise, you're going to mostly look at private schools. Those private schools are not going to be giving preference to in-state residents. For for state schools where you're out of state, you really want to look at the admission statistics and make sure that they take students who are from out of state. Some state schools like University of Vermont, they have amazing stats for in-state. There aren't that many people in Vermont who are applying to the medical school, so they're also taking a really healthy pool of out-of-state residents. So, you could put that on your list of schools if you're a good fit. They have a really big public health focus. So you really, again, you're going to look at that mission and focus of the school. Whereas if you look at a school like potentially SUNY Upstate, they take a very, very small pool of out-of-state students. So if you're thinking about SUNY Upstate, you better really, really have a reason that you want to go to SUNY Upstate to put that on your list. Otherwise, they're not taking a lot of people from out of state, and probably most of the people who they are taking from out of state have some tie to the state. In terms of thinking about, is it okay to say I want to go to school near where I grew up, near my family? Yes, that's fine. The schools understand that, being around your family helps your mental health. It helps you to do better in school, and they're all for that. It's a good idea to have other reasons why you're interested in a particular school. Especially the state schools, they are trying to train physicians who will later practice in state. So, the fact that you have ties and family there, that's a little bit of a strength to them. So, being near family is one reason that you might consider geography. I mean, the fact that you love Boston, you've been here for school, and you want to apply to the Boston schools, BU, Tufts, and Harvard, that's fine. But then you also have to look outside the bubble. So, you want to diversify your list. Make sure it's not all Massachusetts schools. Make sure it's not all state schools where you're out of state. So if you're not a California resident, don't apply to all the California schools. You may pick one or two, but you want to have a lot of private schools on that list as well. Just a note, those schools in Southern California, if you're applying there, make sure that you have a reason that you're applying there. In terms of geography, they don't care that you'd like to be somewhere warm and sunny. They don't care, in general. Things that are of interest to all students, those things they don't care about so much. The fact that you want to be at their program because it's warm, it's beautiful weather, that kind of stuff is less important to them. So when you're framing why you want to go to a school, you really want to frame it in terms of things that matter to the school, and those are things about their program and things that are going to make you successful in their program and make you a good fit with their program. Okay, so where do you start thinking about this? Now, I'm going to send out this presentation to everyone. And so if you've been getting all my millions of emails, you'll get this presentation, a copy of the YouTube that I've made, and just a copy of the PowerPoint. So all of these links are live links, so you'll be able to click on this. If you are applying to MD programs, now is definitely the time to pay for the MSAR, the Medical School Admissions Requirements book. It's about $27 for access for the year. It's well worth it, though. For dental schools, there's an official guide, and I believe there's a fee for that one as well. The DO program, they have an information book. I believe that one is free. sort of along with the DO philosophy of being holistic and warm and fuzzy. And then the veterinary schools also have descriptor pages. You always want to start with your professional organization. Then you want to look at schools. You really want to make sure that you're looking at reliable sources. We all know that fake news is not real. It's become a real issue. So there are pages out there that are not really reliable sources. StudentDoctor.net and Reddit are two places that there's a lot of information, but you have to view that information with some healthy degree of skepticism. I don't recommend going on them most of the time because they can be kind of dark places that will lead you to drive yourself a little bit crazy, to be honest. So really make sure when you're looking at information online that you're sure that it's a reliable source and it's giving you valid information about programs. Okay, so what are you going to look at? So all of these links are live. I'm not going to click through them because it is going to be difficult with the PowerPoint and GoToMeeting, but I do want to talk a little bit about some of them. So mission is one of the first things that you're going to want to consider with a school. And most of the schools are going to have, well, all the schools are going to have a mission statement, obviously. You'll find that a lot of the mission statements are fairly similar. And so you do want to do a little bit of digging. Most of the schools are going to have on their homepage a page that says something like About Us. And if you go to that About Us page, you'll get more of a sense of what's this school about. And a lot of the pages also have a dean's message. And from there, you can also get a sense of, okay, what is this school's priorities? So if you look at a school like Loma Linda, it is in beautiful, sunny Southern California. It has a level 1 trauma hospital. It's also a Christian university. It's affiliated with the Seventh-day Adventist Church, I believe. And, values and lifestyle-wise, if you attend this school, you have to sign something saying that you won't drink alcohol, smoke, or do any illegal drugs for 4 years. You have to attend church or chapel. And there are a few other religious restrictions that they have. So for some people, they would look at that and say, wow, that's perfect. I would love to go there. That's such a perfect fit with who I am. For other people, though, they would say, oh, that's probably not going to be the best fit with who I am. I'm not really that religious of a person. Sometimes people can get so caught up in, oh, it's in Southern California, they have a level 1 trauma hospital, that they don't notice that piece about the mission, and you're just wasting your application fee and wasting your time if you're not a good fit. The same with Howard. Howard is one of the historically Black colleges, and there are a few historically Black colleges. Meharry is another one that have really good medical school programs. They're really committed to underserved populations and social justice, so really committed to educating physicians who are going to work with underserved populations. Now, you don't have to be African American, you don't have to be an underrepresented minority student to go to Howard or to Meharry, but if they look at your application and they see, white kid from the suburbs who's never done anything with social justice or underrepresented minority students, again, they're going to say, why is this applicant applying here? And one of the things that you'll notice if you do a GPA sort or an MCAT sort of schools, and maybe you have a little bit lower GPA and you're like, well, where can I get in with this GPA? You might see that Howard does accept students with somewhat lower GPAs. And so a lot of the time people will apply to Howard thinking, oh, well, they'll accept me because I have a lower GPA. And no, they're not going to. They're going to accept you because they see you as a good fit with who they are. on the other end, you have Harvard, and when you look at their page, you'll see that they opened their doors in the 1700s. So they've been around for a really long time. You'll see they actually have a page listing all of their Nobel laureates, which is very impressive. So you can see the history and the long tradition of Harvard. So when you go to Harvard, you're part of a really long-standing history of physicians. They have an amazing alumni network. Obviously, they have a reputation that's unparalleled. And so you can get a sense of who Harvard is from their website. It is, people have this impression of Harvard as Harvard. It's a really good idea if you're thinking about applying to Harvard to look at the school, look at the mission, look at the different curriculums that they have, because you may not know really what it is about until you've actually looked at the website. Now, Harvard also has a dental school, which is a really amazing program. Again, it's one of the oldest dental schools in the country. If you look at the dental school curriculum at Harvard, interestingly, the dental students are in classes with the medical students. So not only is it one of the oldest programs, it's also one of the hardest programs, most rigorous programs, because you're taking your dental school classes plus the medical school classes. So you're learning maybe a lot more than some of the other dental students. It really prepares you so that when you finish dental school at Harvard, you're able to do all kinds of different things, whether that's work in a dentist's office, work in a specialty, or if you're interested in research, leadership, something along the lines of epidemiology, public health. So they're really looking to educate folks who are not sort of, quote, just dentists, but potentially leaders in dentistry in the future. Now, sort of on the opposite end of that spectrum, if you look at a school like University of New England, they have a brand new dental program. So I think they are the newest dental school. They just opened in 2013. So their program is much newer. It's been much less tested. On the other hand, with a new program, you have a brand new facility, you have the latest technology, because when you set up a new school, you go out and buy all the latest stuff. You set up your curriculum based on the latest research and what is the best thing to do curriculum-wise. You have a program like Harvard's that's been around for a long time. People get very possessive about their curriculums or about their classes. So the faculty don't are reluctant to make curricular changes. Not that they don't want to make changes and keep up with the research and what it shows should be in terms of curriculum, but all of the faculty tend to think that their area of focus is the most important area of focus and should be taught the most. Excuse me for a second here. Sorry about that. So curricular changes happen, but sometimes they happen a little bit more slowly in an established program because the faculty really have to do a lot of compromising, and nobody wants to compromise over their own material because everybody thinks that their stuff is the most important. Whereas with a brand new curriculum, you're all going to sit down together and figure out, okay, what's how do we put this together? And there's no historical precedent. So it creates a little bit less in the way of turf wars. So that can actually influence, an older school versus a newer school. Some pros and cons. Obviously, with an older school, you're going to have a much larger alumni network and a well-established reputation, which you don't have with a new program. But it may be kind of cool to be the sort of first members of a class, people who get to have a little bit more input, and then people who get to sort of be the first group through. You may be able, as alumni, to have a little bit bigger role in the program, you may be able to give back more, you would be able to have a little bit more of a leadership role in the future. So, and then, in terms of the osteopathic medical schools, you'll note that on a lot of their websites, they kind of talk about, okay, what is osteopathic medicine? How is it different than allopathic medicine, which you won't see on the allopathic websites, and you can get kind of a sense of the mission and values. If you look at a school like Touro College, they have a site in Harlem, and you'll see that they talk really pretty well about how they're dedicated to underserved populations and how that's a big area of focus for them. So moving on, curriculum is something that's really important to a lot of people. And you can see I put 3 schools up here, Virginia Tech, Pitt, and Rochester, and they all have kind of different curriculums. Virginia Tech has a case-based learning, which is very much in the model of business schools. So each week you're given a patient case, you learn from the patient case, and from that case you learn about all of the different systems. And what they do that's kind of cool is at the end of the week, they bring in the patient and the physician. So you hear firsthand, okay, well, this is how the case went. But through individual cases, you learn about all of the different systems. Some people really like that. Some people say it takes a little while to get used to it, and they worry about, oh, will I miss something in those first weeks? Pitt has a brand new program. They also have some really interesting areas of concentration. If you want to, it's not a minor, but it's almost kind of, if you kind of think about it in the same sort of way as a minor. Rochester has some interesting electives as well. You'll see that a lot of programs are announcing new curriculums and launching new curriculums, and that's definitely something that you want to be cognizant of. A new curriculum means that the faculty have really decided, okay, that there is a better way to do things. The current model of teaching medicine with 2 years of didactic and 2 years of clinical is based off of a model that was designed by Flexner, which was designed in the early 1900s. So it's a 100-year-old model. Now, obviously, there's been revision on it, but I think that a lot of physicians and medical educators are asking themselves, is there a better way to do this? We're working off of a 100-year-old model. Is there a way to throw this up in the air and completely revise how it's done? And so you'll see that programs are trying to come up with innovative and different ways that are completely moving away from the 2 years didactic, 2 years clinical, or making kind of really big inroads on switching that up a little, getting you into clinical earlier. So that's something that for some people they would prefer to do. A lot of people really like that hands-on learning, and they feel like, okay, if I'm working with patients sooner and I can relate what I did in clinic to the material on the test, that will help me out. And then just a note on pass-fail, a lot of students who I've talked to really prefer the pass-fail. There are some schools that do still give grades, and some people really want to get grades. The difference with pass-fail, most schools are giving pass-fail for the first 2 years, and then maybe grades for the 3rd year for a clinical. A lot of students say that that takes away some of the competitiveness that that you get within medical school, so that people work together better and they're more collaborative. You're not jockeying for place within the class. So if they're not ranking the class, then you don't have to do better than the next person, and that really enhances the spirit of collaboration. So people share their notes, they share their books, they share their study guides. And so a lot of people do like that pass-fail. The data shows that medical students are dedicated enough and intense enough that they're still going to study pretty hard. Whether they get grades or pass-fail, it's just they feel less stressed about it. So some schools are just pass fail, some are high pass, pass, low pass, and fail. And then some schools do still give grades. Some of the pros and cons with that, the collaborative spirit, but then on the other hand, residencies do look at grades, or that's part of what they can look at. If you don't have grades, that takes that piece out. The residency programs look at your board scores. They look at letters of recommendation and interviews, and then if they know you, they're going to look at, how they know you and think about you as a known quantity. So if you're taking out the grade aspect, then they have a little bit less to go on. For some people, they feel like, oh, standardized testing, that's not my favorite thing. And if the only metric that they have is my board score, that's not going to be the best thing for me. Other people kind of feel like, oh, I am not going for the most competitive residency, probably. I think I'll probably want to do internal medicine. I'll probably want to do pediatrics. So, I don't need to be first in my class. A lot of the schools do give grades for that third year, for the clinical year, the first year of clinical rotations, because they're going to report those grades out as a part of the residency. So you can kind of look into that. Um, Dual degrees, there are definitely a lot of different degrees that you can get in conjunction. So MPHs are really popular. The physician scientist MD PhD training is really popular. If that's something that you think you might be interested in, you should definitely email Dr. Begley and set up a time to talk to her. She is a PhD, so she works a lot with the MD PhDs. And then we recommend that you submit all your material early and do your committee letter interview with her because she has a PhD, so you can have her signature with her credentials on your committee letter. Again, that means you want to submit all your materials in a timely manner so that she can, you can set up your appointment with her. MBA is another dual degree. Tufts has a really interesting program that's an MD/MA in International Relations. That's with the Fletcher School of International Relations. So if you're really interested in global public health or global health, working in public service, that's a program that might be of interest to you. And then there are a lot of other programs that are coming up, like this program at the University of Miami that's in genomic medicine. So if you're interested in personalized medicine, for example, that's something that could be of interest to you. So some of these programs, you complete 2 degrees in 4 years. Some of the programs will add a year to your curriculum. Obviously, a PhD will add more than a year. It'll add at least 3 years to your training. So you do want to kind of look into that. And it's, of course, going to make it more expensive as well. Residency placements, you can typically find where people have placed into residencies if that's something that you're concerned about. And, you can I just did a Google search and I pulled up some of these residency lists. What you'll notice for most schools is that there's going to be a cluster of people who place into residencies at the hospitals that are affiliated with the schools. And then there are going to be a cluster of people who are geographically near the schools, but then there are also going to be people who are spread out from the schools. So it's kind of nice to see, okay, where do people go? And then what specialties do people go into? How do they do placing into the kind of specialties that maybe I'll be interested in? People tend to wind up more where they do their residency as opposed to where they did their medical education, although that's not a hard and fast rule. Most of the medical schools have opportunities in that 4th year for you to do elective rotations across the country and globally. So if you're doing elective rotations and let's say you're at Boston University, but you want to move to California eventually, you may elect to do elective rotations in California so you can network and get to know people in, the residencies the residency programs that are out there, so that helps you with getting a residency, because being a known is always useful in any kind of medical training. So that's a little bit of something to think about as well. In terms of residencies, if you're somebody who's like, oh, I know I want to do such and such for my residency, or I'm kind of strongly interested in that. If a school is affiliated with a hospital that has a residency program in a certain area, that's your focus, that may be something that attracts you. So let's say you want to go into neurosurgery. You may want to look at, okay, where are the residency programs in neurosurgery? And then you may want to, see, okay, what medical schools are affiliated with those hospitals. That gives you an opportunity maybe to get a little more experience, maybe to network and get to know people. If they have a residency program, they're going to have a stronger department in that area. So it may just give you the opportunity to get a little bit more knowledge in that area. So then when you're interviewing for residencies, maybe you have a little bit of a leg up in that regard, that you've had a little bit more experience, that you can talk more articulately, that you have on your application an obvious interest in going into that area. Maybe you'll have the opportunity to get some research on the floor or something along those lines. So that is also something that you may be concerned with. Obviously, the financial piece is something that you should think about. Physicians, dentists make a good salary. Veterinarians, if anybody's thinking about veterinary school, they don't make as good of a salary, and they're paying just as much for tuition. Veterinary medicine is definitely a labor of love. But you still, you really want to think about that financial piece and really consider, um, you know, what do I want to be spending, and how much is this going to cost me, and how is that going to impact where I can practice and what I can do. Um, so I just put kind of three different schools on here. Uniformed Services University, which is America's military medical school. They actually pay you a salary when you're in medical school. You're commissioned into the military, Army, Navy, or Air Force, or the public service, and they pay you a salary. When you finish, you owe service, not money. It's 7 years commitment after your residency. And actually, just a side note, we're kind of excited. We've pretty much confirmed that we're going to have somebody from USU on campus. So if you want to write this down, it looks like we're going to have one of the admissions deans on campus March 22nd at 6 p.m. in the Alumni Center. And I will send out a notice on this. Even if you're considering USU, I definitely recommend coming. And then if you're just kind of thinking, oh, military medicine, well, what's that about? I would say it's worth coming and hearing what he has to say. A lot of people don't really know the full picture of military medicine, and so it's kind of interesting to hear, um, the perspective from somebody who's a military physician and is in admissions at the school. And even if you're like, well, I really don't think that that's what I would want to do. I want to work in primary care. I want to establish relationships from, you know, 20-year, 30-year, 40 years long, and I don't think that that's not realistic with the military where people are moving all the time, so I know it's not a good fit. Anytime you can hear from an admissions person, it's still going to be useful. When you look at tuition from a state school, that's generally going to be where your lowest tuition is. So UNC tuition, the average indebtedness at graduation is less than $100,000, which is still a lot of money, but When you look at Chicago Medical School, their tuition, just tuition without housing fees, anything like that, is over $200,000. It's a pretty expensive program. When you're looking at state schools, you probably, if you're applying to state schools where you're out of state, you also want to look at the requirements for getting state residency. So, for example, in California, to get California residency, you have to live there for a year. You have to change your driver's license, or, if you don't drive, your state ID, you have to register to vote there. So you have to do a bunch of different things to declare residency and live there for a year. But after you've lived there for a year, you can declare residency. So yes, the first year, if you haven't been a resident, you would have to pay a higher tuition. But then for the subsequent, I believe the subsequent 3 years, you can qualify for in-state tuition. Now, you would have to double check on that. That's my understanding. I could be wrong, but that's my understanding. So even if you're not a state resident now, there are some states where you can get residency during the time that you're in medical school and qualify for a reduced tuition for 2-3 years out of your medical education. And then there are the public medical or the private medical schools, which in general tend to be more expensive. Some of the medical schools do offer financial assistance, for example, scholarship. It tends to be that those scholarships are offered to you at admission or when they send you your financial aid award, and those tend to be more inducements to get you to come to the school, although sometimes they are based on looking at your financial record. A lot of people do pay for medical school with loans. That's certainly a fact. So other things that may be of interest to you, special programs. A lot of programs, I just picked Tufts, but they have their Sherwood Project free clinic. A lot of a lot of schools do have a student-run free clinic or a student-run medical clinic. That may be something that you're interested in. Tufts, as you know, has the main track, and there are a lot of schools that have programs like that. Jefferson has the physician shortage program. New, I believe this year or last year, UMass does now have a program that is for primary care, and they'll be having special clinical sites at Bay State Medical in Springfield, I believe. So it's going to be a small program. But if you're somebody who's interested in primary care or underserved populations, a lot of the time there is a special track for that. Sometimes there's even scholarship money available for that. Jefferson has a really interesting program that's a refugee health program, and I believe that that was set up by the medical students. So, when you're looking at school and you're trying to get a sense of distinctiveness from schools, you can kind of see, oh, wow, this might be something, if you're somebody who's always wanted to work with refugee health, well, there's a way to get some experience. The Jeff Hope program is a community service program that they have that's mostly student run. So if you're somebody who's really involved in community service and you see, well, they have a really huge community service program and that's a huge part of who they are, you may feel like, oh, okay, this is a place where I'm going to fit in and I'm really going to feel at home and I'm going to really be able to find my niche and find who I am as a physician. Another program that I put on here is Drexel. Drexel, you may not know, it's a new school, but it was sort of founded from the merging of two older schools, one of which was the first medical school for women. So Drexel comes from sort of a history of women's medical education. And if you look at their website, they really have a lot on there about women's health, mentoring women, women in leadership. So, if you're somebody who's really interested in that women's health, the women's leadership programs, you may want to look at Drexel and see, wow, would this be a program that's a good fit for me? So looking at the schools and really digging down in the websites and doing a lot of searching around, looking at student life, looking at student activities, looking at curriculum, clicking on links. It should be fun. You should really go through the websites and kind of really see what's in there, really see what kinds of activities are people engaging in, what sorts of things are out there. Affiliated hospitals, Harvard, I just put all of them. If you look at the list of Harvard hospitals, they're affiliated with Mass General, the Brigham, Dana-Farber, Boston Children's, um, Joslin Diabetes. So kind of all of the major top tier medical centers in Boston. So if you're somebody who's like, I want to train at the best hospitals with the best equipment and the most well-known physicians and just the shiniest and the newest, where they're doing cutting edge work and people come from all over the world for care because they know this is the place to go when they have an illness that can't be helped anyplace else. And you may get the opportunity to see things that you wouldn't see other places. I mean, Harvard is a place where you can do that. Um, I guess I probably don't need to sell Harvard really, but they are affiliated with a lot of really amazing hospitals in the Boston area. Now, that said, that doesn't mean there aren't amazing hospitals outside of the Boston area. University of Tennessee, for example, is affiliated with St. Jude Children's Hospital, another really amazing cutting edge hospital. Nobody's turned away because of their inability to pay for treatment. And that is a really amazing aspect of their program. Um, you know, physicians don't have to, physicians are thinking about how do I care for this patient best, not, okay, is insurance going to pay for this? And so getting to be a part of that environment is something that I think some people might feel like, oh, wow, that would be amazing. And that's kind of something to be thinking about when you're considering hospitals. If you're somebody who knows, like, oh, I know I want to go into pediatrics, well, what kind of children's hospitals is the school that you're hoping to attend affiliated with, and what kind of education would you get at that pediatric hospital? Or if you're thinking, I know I want to do oncology, or I think I want to do oncology, what kind of oncology care is going on around there? And then I put Des Moines University on here. They're a osteopathic medical school. And when you look at their list of hospitals, they're much more affiliated with community hospitals, local area hospitals. And, we get kind of spoiled in the Boston area thinking about Mass Generals and the children's. Most care takes place in community hospitals and local hospitals. And so if you want to train in the place where most people are getting their care, that makes a lot of sense. Not everybody's going to get exposed to the latest and greatest and shiniest. And they're mostly going to, you may be somebody who wants to be out there helping people on an everyday basis. And that's an amazing way to do it, right? Because that's where most of the people are. So, having that opportunity to train in a place where you can really learn, okay, how am I going to take care of people in the future when I'm working in the type of hospital that most people are getting their care at? Research opportunities for a lot of people. They've done research as an undergraduate and they've really enjoyed it and they want that to be part of their medical school experience. And I just put up a few different ideas here. Stanford. When you look at Stanford, you'll see if you're somebody who loves research and you go to Stanford's homepage, you'll be like, I have come home. Stanford is so engaged with research, and there are a lot of the top tier schools who are really focused on research and advancing knowledge in the medical profession. And so, obviously those schools are really competitive to get into. So you don't want to fill up your portfolio with just top tier research universities, right? But if you're somebody who's like, oh man, this would be perfect, you want to choose at least a couple that you're like, okay, this is my dream school, and I think I would be a good match because of X, Y, and Z, and put them, apply there. Um, Pitt has a really interesting program, the physician scientist program. It's a 5-year program, right? You do 2 years of didactic, then you do a year of research, and then your 2 clinical years. Your research year is actually funded, and you get additional funding for your clinical years. So although it's not an MD, PhD, they do help you with that research portion, which is really nice, actually, because there aren't always a ton of opportunities out there for research funding. And then I put UMass on here just to point out that you don't have to be Stanford to be doing research. Most of the medical schools are doing research. I think when you start looking at maybe some of the smaller or more clinically focused schools, you'll see that rather than Stanford level research where you can probably find just about any type of research, some of the other schools are doing research in more siloed areas, so they're concentrating their focus of research. So if you're somebody who has a really strong sense of what they want to do research in and you're looking at a specific school, you may want to look and see, well, would I be able to do that kind of research here? Are there a few people who do it? You don't necessarily, if you love a specific kind of research and there's only one person doing it there, you don't want to put all your eggs in that one basket because maybe their lab is full, maybe they're crazy, maybe they get recruited by somebody else and they leave, and then where are you? So it's always nice to have more than one option. And then finally, patient contact is obviously something that's, what you're going to medical school for. Um, so you can look at the curriculums and information about patient contact. You'll see that some of the medical schools like Quinnipiac are really dedicated to primary care. All of the schools are going to have something about their mission in primary care, but you can see that some of them are really particularly focused on that primary care, and they're going to be more focused on the patient contact and working with patients and just being every day in the clinic with patients. One school that has kind of an interesting model is Hofstra. All the medical students do EMT training in the first week of medical school, and they're riding in the ambulances and working as EMTs at the start of medical school. So if you're somebody who's like, oh, I feel like I'm going to want to have some training before I start in the clinical setting, that might be something that's of interest. Or if you're somebody who's an EMT and you're like, oh, that would be so awesome, I would still get to work as an EMT because I would hate to give that up just because I started medical school because I just love doing it so much. That might be something that you look at and think, wow, well, that would be a good fit. Interestingly, as I was talking about earlier, Duke has revised their curriculum, and they do have a curriculum where the clinical begins in the second year. So they only do 1 year of didactic, and then the second year you start in your clinical rotations. Your third year is research, and then the last year is elective. So I'm not sure how they're exactly doing that, but if you're somebody who's like, I can do the book stuff pretty well. I was in biochemistry. I can picture myself being in 5 biochemistry classes without much problem. I'm really good with the books and testing. I want to get out there and get as much as possible out of this. That's a thought. Just a few final thoughts. I know we're running a little low on time, and I want to have a minute or two for questions. Put together a spreadsheet or however you want to organize stuff with thoughts of your research on the different schools so you're not going back to the same websites over and over again. You're going to refer back to all of this information when you fill out your secondaries and you prepare for your interview. So a lot of the secondaries are going to ask you, why do you want to come to this school? And you want to have an answer, and you want to, there's no point in going back and thinking about it again. You might as well have that all written out. And also, a lot of the interviews, they're going to ask you, why do you want to come here? So you're going to want to talk about that again. After you go to interviews, you're going to want to write down notes somewhere, because a lot of you are going to have more than one offer, and you're going to want to remember, okay, what did I like about this school? What attracted me to this program? What are my thoughts immediately after the interview? So that if you're choosing between two schools 6 or 8 months later, you can refer back to those notes. So that's just a good place to kind of be looking at that stuff. Remember to try as much as possible to relax, breathe, chill out if you can. This is a long process. People think, oh, well, this is going to be the hardest part. But it really, it's stressful all along way. Some people say the letters part is the hardest because it's out of your control. Some people say getting everything together and applying is the hardest. Some people say those secondaries, because there's so many of them and they're coming fast, is hard. Some people say the waiting for interviews is hard, the interviews themselves. So definitely I would just recommend working on those stress management tips or strategies. Now is a really good time to start if you haven't already. So if you have questions, you can feel free to type them in the chat box. If you have to get back to work or you have something that you need to get to, I certainly understand if you need to go now. I will stay here and answer any questions that you may have, though. And thank you for coming, everyone. And I'm going to stop the recording now. So thanks for everybody online.